TopMedTalk.
Welcome to TopMedTalk, the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, evidence-based perioperative medicine. Stand by for a healthy conversation. But first, the 2026 International Practicum on Cardiopulmonary Exercise Testing will be held from September the 16th to the 18th of this year. It is organised by iPoets, the International Perioperative Testing and Training Society. Come and join us at this premier educational event designed for clinicians, scientists and healthcare professionals interested in sport, exercise and perioperative medicine. Check out ebpom.org for the best prices and information now. That's ebpom.org. And remember, this is an International Perioperative Testing and Training Society accredited event. So when you attend, you can get your iPoets accreditation showing that you are a practitioner who has reached a high standardized level of competence in performing and interpreting cardiopulmonary exercise testing for patients preparing for major surgery. Check out ebpom.org now.
Hello and welcome to TopMedTalk. I'm Kate Leslie, I'm your host, and I'm here with my co-host Mike Grocott at the Collaborative Clinical Trials meeting in Prato in Italy. This is a biannual meeting where trialists get together to discuss breaking trials, and we always have some great guests at the meeting from the broader scientific community, Mike.
It's a great meeting. This is the 8th biannual meeting, so we've been going, or Paul and Sophie have been going, I guess heading for 20 years now, and it's always a fantastic meeting. It's a great venue, wonderful environment, and extraordinary guests and speakers and faculty, which probably brings us to our TopMedTalk guests.
So we'd like to welcome to the podcast Eric Rubin and Jocalyn Clark. Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Eric Rubin from Boston. I'm an infectious disease practitioner, but here in my capacity as editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine.
Excellent. And Jocalyn?
I'm Jocalyn Clark. I'm the international editor of the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, formerly executive editor of The Lancet. I'm a Canadian who's lived and worked all over the world, but based now in the UK.
So we thought we'd start the podcast with the joys of publishing. Maybe you, Jocalyn, what do you like about being a journal editor and leading such a magnificent journal?
Thank you. I like almost everything about my job. I'm one of these people who was by serendipity, really, that I ended up being a professional journal editor now going on 24 years. But of course, this is a career path they don't teach you in medical school or graduate school. So I feel really fortunate that I managed to find this professional career path, and I've had the great privilege of working for a number of journals, including the Public Library of Science, The Lancet, and now am back at the BMJ where I started my career those 20-odd years ago. And I guess what I'm thinking about that I love the most now that we're at this meeting in this wonderful setting, as Mike said, is just how sort of fun and enriching and motivating it is for me as an editor to be out in the wild speaking to jobbing clinical researchers. And here, it's mostly trialists working in a field that, 20 years ago was a very different kind of space than it is now. Like, to have seen the growth of trials in anesthesia and surgery more generally is fantastic for me. And I get just so excited to hear people talk about their work, go up there on the stage and have the courage to discuss either their design that they're about to implement or their new findings. And then also, of course, to see the stars in people's eyes when they, reveal to the group that their important work has been published in a major journal. I love it.
It's a very sort of everything out there meeting, isn't it? You really famous investigators they'll do the big reveal on their p-value or lack of p-value or whatever the results are, but there's also a lot of reflection, and we really stuffed this trial up because we got these inclusion criteria wrong or we chose the wrong methods. And that it's great to see the humility as sharing with the broader audience.
How about you, Eric? What do you find joy in publishing?
Well, I come to publishing in a different direction. I was a researcher. I still am a researcher. And so rather than being a professional editor like Jocalyn, I came to it with a love of research already built in. That's what I wanted to do. And it is incredible to sit down and read all these amazing pieces of research, things that will change medicine every week, and be surrounded by a group of colleagues who are equally excited about what they do. So it is a fantastic job. But I'll echo completely what Jocalyn said. Coming out here and hearing someone talk about their work is a completely different experience than the sort of very strict formal style that appears in an article that they submit.
I guess we feel that way when we submit to journals. We think of you as these, the gatekeepers of our work, and actually behind there's a human, with a curious and interesting person who we should try and engage and get them to like our work.
I think we all love what we do. We really do. This is kind of the pinnacle of our careers, to have reached the point where we're able to see all this work out there. So we're excited to see what people submit to us. And we can't take it all. It's true. We can't take 95% of it. Still, it's very exciting.
Just don't worry, we're not expecting it to be accepted when we submit to the England Journal. It's a bit like the lottery sometimes. Although obviously much more structured.
But it is an unusual circumstance that I think also makes this meeting special, is that we have researchers interacting with editors in a kind of more close way than in, the big meetings like the ASCOs and the HIV meeting and that sort of thing, where you might see editors on a panel, but you don't get the chance to be chatting with them over coffee. I love that. And I think that a lot of your colleagues here probably find it quite revealing to meet people like Eric and I and the other wonderful editors that have been here over the year, and to kind of learn what's under the hood. For you guys, you're at a considerable disadvantage, not only because of the amount of pressure placed upon you to try to get your work published and published quickly, but also just how opaque the process, for whatever reason, has tended to be. You hit send on the online manuscript submission system, and you've just kind of got to wait. And I don't think there's many steps in that process where a submitting author would feel like they were in control or they were powerful. And here they get to hear from us. And I hope and expect that they find this incredibly interesting, to learn that we're just, as you just described us, Kate, rightly, humans who take decisions based on our strategic priorities, but our own, disciplinary backgrounds and what we care about.
I'm really glad you got there, because when you started saying you're at such a disadvantage, I was thinking you were going to get to, you're in Australia, so far away from actual real people.
Well, there's that. It's kind of them to hold their meeting in Italy instead of Australia, because it would have been harder for us to get there, of course.
I wonder if we could take a bit of a left turn. So we're on human. Amongst the issues that were highlighted by both of you in your presentations was the challenges of artificial intelligence. So I'm just throwing that open completely, and then maybe we'll come back to some questions. So, Eric?
Maybe I'll start there. There have been enormous advantages for researchers in using AI. Certainly, machine learning is part of their research. It's very integral in many aspects of science right now, and that's different from generalized artificial intelligence. But I think the biggest benefit we've seen is particularly for people for whom English is not their first language. They can submit material that is much more understandable, much more likely to make it through over that initial hurdle of becoming interested in what they're doing. And so it's really opened up the world in a way that was very difficult before for all those people who had the disadvantage of not coming from an English-speaking country. There are many, many problems. I'm going to leave some of those to Jocalyn, but I just want to take a couple of them. I'll stick with the research side. We worry about whether our reviewers are going to keep things confidential, whether reviewers will upload to AI. We don't really care about what AI's opinion is of work for the most part. We've asked an expert for their expertise, and so we really don't want them relying on conclusions drawn by an AI. So we worry, are our reviewers going to use it incorrectly? We worry that some of what's generated in the initial text may not be accurate. It might not actually represent what's in the manuscript. What was in the initial research. And we worry that AI could be used to create false information. And we've seen some examples of that. So when it comes to pure research, reporting pure research, AI can be helpful, but there are some issues. But I think I'll leave it to Jocalyn to talk about the other sorts of problems that AI creates.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's, in the day-to-day work, it's become such an important distraction for me and my team, because the ways that the tools, so here we're not just talking about AI tools in health or healthcare, but AI tools that are being utilized in and involved in the writing and publishing aspects of the work. They are proliferating and improving at such a rapid rate that we as editors and journals can hardly keep up in terms of how we're responsibly governing that, let's call that. So our AI use policies, I'm not joking when I say we could almost, update a use policy every week, because we're seeing new ways that we could define a prompt and have it, kind of update weekly to ensure that we stay on top of our practice. So sort of the governance issue of it all does concern me, notwithstanding what Eric was describing, which is for a lot of our colleagues, both for whom English isn't the first language, but for otherwise would have, for whatever reason, been excluded from the medical literature, our colleagues in the Global South, for example. It's a real game changer. And of course, many of them come from environments where the use of technology in health has been a leapfrog, and this is no exception. So I think just that interface between how we can both, recognize and value the utility of AI to make research and publishing more efficient, potentially more equitable on one hand, but then on the other, those kind of integrity issues that Eric was just mentioning, where AI can be deployed in ways that are, intended to evade a certain set of standards that we need to maintain and hold. And that's, at the very most basic level, what is the definition of an author if you're using AI so much to generate the content that comes into a manuscript?
Eric mentioned that his journal and all journals, in fact, are receiving a tsunami of correspondence that is arriving, hours after the publication of work. And we're all puzzling about what to do about that. I mean, some of the remarks that are made are quite valid. And is that okay? What do you think, Eric? How are we going to deal with it? It's taking up a lot of time.
It's really interesting, and the way you phrased it is important. I know of one journal where the editor realized that a letter had been written by AI, but thought it was such a good question that it should be answered by the author anyway. Because AI can do a pretty good job, and this is what it's very good at, is taking a published paper and analyzing it and finding potential flaws or potential drawbacks, etc. But there are a couple of issues. First off, we want this to be a forum. We want letters to the editor to be a forum for people to exchange ideas, and the idea of just injecting random ideas from AI is problematic. The volume is a big problem. Now, the one tool we have for it, though, which is particular for correspondence, is we now look to see how many letters has that person written or published in the last year, because in the end, a person takes credit for them. And that means that we get to follow what they've done. And when we see 50 letters on 50 different topics in the last year, that does raise alarms.
Just building on that, Jocalyn, in your talk, you highlighted idea generation as a problem, and it just left me thinking, because I mean I will occasionally while away, hopefully not hours, but certainly minutes, almost conversing with one or other of the AIs, and I suspect many of our colleagues do. Now, if I throw in some ideas come back, there's an iterative process, and at the end of it, there's an idea that I feel happy with as a human. Where does that sit in our conceptual space?
Yeah. So I described in my talk how it's been quite rapid, but it has been an evolution. So 18 months ago only, 2 years ago only, it was just the beginnings of, the presence of the non-human author coming into the journal and what we were doing by publishing research that, at the end of the day is a part of the scientific record. So that started with those little bits of hallucinating references. And then we started seeing people using, or admitting at least, disclosing that they were using AI tools for some help with figures and tables. And I see, so you see where I'm going. Like there was all sort of acceptable, and then the evolution, kind of opened up a little bit more, and we were seeing people disclosing that they were using it for their literature reviews, which seemed, as Eric was just saying with letters, like kind of a summative function of a AI tool seemed, again, acceptable. But it's a bit of a slippery slope. So where I've landed on this question you just asked me, Mike, which I described in my talk today, is, and I don't have the answer, but is something that's really making me think a lot. If particularly for the big journals that we edit, one of the most important criteria for us is originality or novelty. And you're using tools to help you so-called generate new ideas. What does that mean exactly? So that's a question I think that's going to throw a real challenge for us. But here's the thing, back to my point about the policies and governance. If me and my colleagues at the BMJ were to introduce an updated AI use policy tomorrow, that said, at the BMJ, AI use is permitted for language editing, translation, and help with grammar. Guess what every AI use declaration going forward would say? So there is that sort of tricky bit about how willing and open and transparent authors are in terms of how they're using AI, because it's going to be clearly defined, but what the rules say that they can. And that doesn't, help us answer that question of what's reasonable and fair and responsible governance of AI in our field.
I think before I get holier than thou in speaking about it, I should tell one story, which is we have a sister journal, NEJM AI, and they did an experiment where they said, we will go out looking for a preprint that looks like something we'd be interested in, invite it in, and offer to make a decision and accept or reject decision on the manuscript in 8 days. But the authors have to agree to a single editorial review by one of the editors and then 2 different AI reviews. And we will make our decision on that basis and publish all the reviews. And they've done it for two articles so far, to my knowledge, both of which got accepted, both of which got published along with the AI commentary. And truthfully, both of them were very statistical intensive, and so that played to the strengths of an AI reviewer in some ways. But the reviews were not that distinguishable from the editor's review, and found some flaws or things that could be improved that the editor hadn't found. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, we're saying we're really worried about AI. At the same time, all of us want to innovate in that area. So it's a double-edged sword.
I mean, the novelty thing, I don't think most investigators spend most of their time sitting in a dark room thinking great ideas. For me, the idea generation typically happens around meetings like this, around conversations. There's an evolution. You listen to questions in a session. And I'm struggling to distinguish, and therefore the novelty isn't all mine. It's the product of the environment. And then is the same true if I'm interacting with an AI and it gets a concept which goes into the public forum and then is discussed and accepted or rejected? I don't have the answer. I'm finding it a really intriguing time.
It's good. It's also, I think, worth reflecting on the ways that we're, can sometimes feel holier than thou with research content versus commentary. And I think we're probably, as a group of journal editors, a little more concerned about the role of AI in commentary, because there your expectation of original argumentation, of scholarly analysis, still evidence-based, of course, but this is opinion. Sometimes journals, we pay certain correspondents, or certainly our news correspondents and some of our columnists, for their, hot take or their reportage. And in those circumstances, I think, the role of AI becomes something rather different than some of what you're describing, Mike, when it comes to, both generating a new idea in a vast scientific literature and the presentation of research data.
So, we've mentioned that, knowledge translation and making sure the right information gets out there to clinicians and patients in the community is important. And the possible, the good things that AI could do about that, or in fact that it could be part of the problem. In this day and age, we're increasingly having trouble getting our high quality material to be seen in the right way, read properly, and accepted by people who are increasingly skeptical about science. And both your journals have done lots of great things in making the research more acceptable, infographics and social media and stuff, but that doesn't seem to be penetrating adequately to the people that we're really trying to influence, Eric.
I agree. I think this is a major challenge for us. Certainly at our journal, and I'll wager at all the major journals, including yours, Jocalyn's, we've been thinking about our audience. We traditionally write for physicians, and our imagined audience is a practicing doctor. We write for researchers as well, but we're thinking about a practicing doctor. And certainly part of combating misinformation is getting good information to that physician who is often a trusted individual within their communities and is able to disseminate that. But should we be talking to the general public in a more explicit way, rather than having the New York Times write about something that we published? Would we be best off trying to package things so that patients, their families, people who wanted to remain healthy and were interested in healthfulness could consume? And I think we are probably heading in that direction. It is not our expertise, so we have to learn how to do it. And I think we're doing it for that very reason, because misinformation is a huge problem. Now, can we do that and retain the trust that our readers have in us? I don't know, and I think that that's going to be the biggest challenge for us.
You have some great videos with Dr. Glockenflocken, who translates your trials. They're fantastic. What I was really thinking about were those people, patients or potential patients who go to the internet to look up their condition, and, they're deeply skeptical and lacking in trust of the elites, of, the left wing, of liberal science, etc. Maybe they have a background that makes them that way, and how to convince them to choose your evidence over some misinformation in the literature or on the internet, Jocalyn.
Yeah, it's another $1 million challenge. I guess first, if I could go back to the audience question, because I think that's a really, really important question and one we think about all the time. During the pandemic, COVID-19, our audiences actually became really, really broad. So it wasn't just qualified or trained healthcare providers and policymakers, for example. Actually, journals like the New England Journal of Medicine, the Lancet, the BMJ, became household names for the public quite widely. And so I know our readership numbers are down from the height of the pandemic, but nevertheless, people are accessing what we do and keeping their eye on what we do in ways that they hadn't been before. And I think the media is an important audience, and not always a professional science correspondent or a professional medical reporter who's taking the things that we publish and making them accessible. So in a lot of ways, we are a more direct source of information than we were before. And I think there's a lot of challenges associated with that, as Eric was just saying. In terms of form, there's just no doubt about it. People, listen, if we took a survey of all the amazing folks in the room, including Eric and I, how many of you still read medical journals? If we were honest, we would say not a hell of a lot. I don't even read my own medical journal. I don't have enough time. I don't have the attention span that I used to, and I know nobody else does. And also just the ways that we consume are different because of the use of social media. And, all the evidence out there shows that people are reading differently, and they're coming to us differently. They're not coming to us every Friday morning and reading us cover to cover. I can't remember what day the New England Journal comes out, but I think
Thursday.
Thursday. Your guys are Thursday. BMJ and Lancet are on a Friday. But you see what I'm saying. So I think the use of the videos that you were just describing, the use of social media platforms like TikTok are important. But my answer to your question is actually it cannot be people like us. I mean, Eric and I and all the other editors that we work with are not trained in communications. We're trained public health scientists and physicians. So it cannot seriously be left to us to work out that problem. And then the next layer of the problem, which you're describing, Kate, which is a deeply concerning one, which is how do we bridge divisions of people? Because for most of the history of the publication of our medical journals, we've had people on board, and we haven't had to fight against this important and actually growing movement that's anti-science.
I was really struck this morning in your presentation, Jocalyn, it's been going on for centuries, but the battle between science and alternative ways of thinking. And there are particular alternative ways of thinking around now. But isn't it, this sounds a bit maybe overblown, but it's a little bit beholden on us as the community that drive science. They're all medical practitioners, healthcare professionals, to get out there, to our neighbours, the people we meet in the coffee shops and the pubs, and actually be a bit more strident about the importance of experiment and real data and not just make it up as you go along.
I was reflecting on that when a colleague of mine WhatsApped me during my presentation this morning, asking me what my view would be on how her university should prioritize curriculum around climate and health.
That's a great text for a WhatsApp message,
I know,
isn't it?
It's a bit amazing. But she's an amazing woman, and I suspect she was, kind of doing an informal survey with her friends and colleagues over WhatsApp. But it did make me think that actually there are other groups, let's say, or movements in either the recent history or the past history that we could learn from in medicine. So, and I think about the climate and health advocates, if we can call them that. They're now used to mobilizing against the opposition. So whether it's governments or just other members of the community that don't believe, that the climate crisis is an existential threat to our planet and to the health of populations. And I think the climate change communities are also good at forging alliances with other groups that we're not so good at in health and medicine. And so there's probably lessons for us from those types of movements. And we could get a lot better, as I argued this morning, that we could get a lot better to work collaboratively and collectively. Medical journals, especially the big ones, because we're published by companies that are hugely profitable. I mean, we're not in the charity business here, as you might have guessed.
Well, wait a second. We're a nonprofit.
We are. Yeah. Oh, okay. Understandably. But the broader spectrum of scientific publishing is a highly, highly valued and productive industry. But what I'm saying is we have tended to be, and here I speak only from 23 years of experience, more competitive than we have been cooperative. And now we're facing an enormous challenge with some of the assaults on science and medicine that are happening from the US and globally that I think we could work together more.
I find that the key thing that comes across in particularly some of your editorials, Eric, is not just the effect on researchers and on the building up of knowledge, but on actual people. Like, why isn't it compelling that changes in policy result in the death of 15 million people from HIV who didn't need to die? What is unconvincing about that, Eric?
Maybe you're asking the wrong guy because I wrote that. But
yeah.
But I do think that we do have a special relationship that actually is more difficult in climate change. Yes, everyone experiences climate change, but they experience it as the hot spell they had or the weird storm they had, as opposed to patients, people who are sick. You have a very direct connection to. They are looking for help. They are vulnerable. And it is an opportunity to communicate, not to take advantage of their vulnerability, but an opportunity to get a chance to say, there are improvements in medicine. There are things that work for what you have. May not be a cure for what you have, but we can make things better for you. So I think we do have an opportunity that's special and that not all branches of science have. So we should take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that not only is collective action important, but we have an opportunity with every patient interaction to make it better, Mike.
We probably have more of a privileged position than we sometimes recognise, that despite all the challenges that there are around, patients typically will trust a healthcare professional, and possibly doctors specifically, and that's both a privilege but also an opportunity.
Yeah, and we trust the New England Journal of Medicine and the BMJ.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for coming on our lowly podcast. We're very, very honoured.
Oh, no, it's wonderful.
It's a privilege to be here, honestly.
Thank you very
It certainly
much.
is. Thank you both.
We'd like to thank our hosts at the Collaborative Clinical Trials meeting for allowing us to interview their delegates and guests. We'd like to thank our sponsors, which are at the moment GE and BD Advanced Patient Monitoring. You'll be able to find this podcast on our website. You can get it from your podcatcher. We're very modern. We're on all social media outlets, aren't we, Mike?
I don't think that's modern anymore.
No, well,
Sorry for
all
interrupting
things
your
are
closure.
relative. And if you go there, please download, please like. It all helps us bring our content free and open access to the world. Thank you so much again for coming, and cheers.
TopMedTalk.
And remember, the 2026 International Practicum on Cardiopulmonary Exercise Testing will be held from September the 16th to the 18th of this year. Come and join us at this premier educational event designed for clinicians, scientists and healthcare professionals interested in sport, exercise and perioperative medicine. Check out ebpom.org for the best prices and information now. That's ebpom.org.